Okay, Bitcoin skeptic, this video is for you. I am going to attempt to convince you of the merits of Bitcoin. So for all you skeptics out there, I'm going to walk through the arguments I would make if you and I were sitting down for coffee somewhere and we were talking about Bitcoin. And first of all, let me tell you where most skeptics are coming from. So most people are skeptical of Bitcoin because they don't really understand it. They don't really understand what it's backed by. They don't really understand why we need this new form of electronic, digital, internet native money. And the whole thing just sort of makes it's just not a rabbit trail they've ever gone down. They're maybe sort of secretly hoping maybe it'll all just go away and they'll be glad that they didn't have to figure out what Bitcoin was or how it worked. They got questions about Bitcoin mining. What is that? Anyway, it's just for all those reasons, the average person, starts out skeptical of Bitcoin. And I would say that is universal for everyone. Nobody starts out an automatic, or almost nobody starts out, fundamentally understanding Bitcoin just inherently. Almost everybody has to learn. So this conversation is for you. So if you and I were sitting down having coffee, the first thing I would do is say, okay, let's set the baseline. Is it important that humans have some sort of a money? Meaning we don't have to barter. We don't have to try to trade, a dozen eggs for a cow or a piece of leather for shoes. And most people, that part of the conversation will only take a minute or two because most people have not thought about it, but most people would admit pretty readily that yes, barter is not bartering for stuff is not really an efficient and effective way of running an economy. So yes, it sort of does make sense for everybody to exchange their labor for something and then use that something to buy what they need, the goods and services they need. And the thing we use to do that is called money. So in the first minute or two or three of the conversation, I would start by sort of laying the groundwork of, do we need money? Do we at least agree that something will be used as money in a society? Okay, so after the first 1 to 3 minutes, most people would say, yes, okay, I get it. Yes, you're right. Money sort of is necessary. You're right. We do need money. Money's not going away. Money is a valuable technological invention of humanity. We actually do need money. Okay, so the next step is to understand, okay, well, what are the options? If we agree that we sort of do need money as a fundamental sort of technology that makes humanity work, let's talk about what the potential options are. And there's typically three. We can use gold. We can use fiat currency, and the word fiat means made up or declared by fiat, sort of invented out of nothing or backed by nothing, which is what fiat currency is, like the US dollar. Or we can use Bitcoin. Those are really the three options right now. Okay, so the first thing would be to understand that if we're going to use something as money, why is fiat currency, which is what most people use as money today, why is fiat currency not ideal? And the answer to that is because humans are fallen individuals. Humans are sinful. Humans have a tendency, if they're given a magic money printer, to print too much money. And so now if people are not willing to believe that, then admittedly it does get hard to convince them that something other than fiat currency is necessary, because if people think that the government is a benign, benevolent, benign, whatever, is the government's there to do good. They do a good job. Maybe people make mistakes now and then, but in general, the government just does good, and they like the U.S. monetary policy, and they're okay with between 3% and 9% inflation on a typical yearly basis, then obviously, it's hard to convince somebody that doesn't see a problem that there is a problem. Of course, the main problem, there's the two biggest problems with fiat currency is, one, that it causes massive boom-bust cycles. These massive, debt cycles where the government prints a ton of money, people borrow and get massively over-leveraged, and then the whole thing crashes like it did in 2008. That is a completely unnecessary cycle, and it hurts a lot of people. So the first reason to eliminate fiat currencies is because it eliminates the boom-bust cycle. Sorry. Bug. It eliminates the boom-bust cycle that we are forced to live with because of the irresponsibility of the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy. Okay, so that's the first reason. The second is because fiat currency, literally, it's like an ice cube that melts in your hand. You just, the longer you hold it, the more value you lose, which forces you, instead of being able to sit on US dollars or whatever, it forces you to invest virtually all of your assets, because if you don't invest them, they are going to lose between 3 and 9% every single year, which is obviously super painful and is constantly, eating away. You have to constantly trying to be getting raises at work of more than 3 to 9% a year. Otherwise, you're constantly falling behind. And that's what happened since the year 2000, the year 2000 and the year 2020. Most people feel like their cost of living is increasing faster than their paychecks are increasing. And the reason for that is because it's true. It's because for most people, inflation is eating away at their purchasing power faster than their paycheck is rising, meaning it is harder to put food on the table in 2024 than it was in 2023 or 2022 or 2021. It just keeps getting harder because maybe you're getting a 3%, salary increase at work, but your cost of living is really going up more like 5, 6, 7% every year, which is what's happening as a result of the massive amounts of government money printing. So, to recap where we are in the conversation, the first part, the conversation I would have with a Bitcoin skeptic is, do we at least agree that money as a technology is valuable for humans to use at all? And assuming the answer to that is yes, which it virtually always is, then the second question is, okay, let's talk about, do you see an issue with fiat currencies, which is the currencies humans, around the world are mostly using now? And again, if people are if they like it that way, then it feels very much like trying to convince someone that is using seashells as money when the whole world is slowly shifting to gold, that they ought to switch. And it's just really hard to convince somebody who doesn't see a problem. So in the case of, seashells and gold, I would try to convince somebody that, hey, look, these seashells that we used to think were rare on our island are increasingly not rare because our scouts keep going back, going out to far-flung islands and finding tons more seashells. And so the longer you hold seashells believing that they are money, the more the seashells keep multiplying. And it's probably better to switch to this thing called gold because it's an element of the periodic table and you can't make more of it. So yeah, you can find more gold, but there's a finite amount of it, and all of the gold in the world is hard to find. That's just the nature of gold. It was distributed in a way in the world that tends to be hard to find. But if somebody really wants to hang on to their seashells, it gets, hard to convince them otherwise. And what happens is their seashells become less and less valuable as everybody switches to gold. So the same thing is happening with fiat currencies and Bitcoin right now. As people switch to Bitcoin, everyone who is left holding fiat currencies increasingly is holding fiat currencies that lose value faster and faster, while the people who have switched to the new money, in this case Bitcoin, have increased in purchasing power. So to recap, money is a valuable technology. Fiat currencies have problems of the boom-bust cycle caused by central bank money printing and the debasement of the currency, meaning the currency keeps getting less valuable and inflated by the government. And so if somebody understands that that is a problem and that they want to, that it's worth at least evaluating a solution to that problem, it gets a lot more probable that someone will, understand the value of Bitcoin. So from there, typically somebody would say, okay, I get it. Money is a valuable technology. We need that, fully admit that. Okay. I understand why gold, didn't work. Settlement speeds are too slow, whatever, but, we're not going back to the gold standard. Okay. So then let's go to the specific objections to Bitcoin. The first objection they typically have to Bitcoin is, it's not physical in nature. Well, I did a whole video about, what is Bitcoin backed by that I posted immediately prior to this one. And so, that's people's first holdup. So I'm not going to recap that other than to say, Bitcoin is backed by, the world's most powerful network and the world's strongest cryptography. And you can go watch that video if you're interested in, or read the Parker Lewis article on unchained.com entitled "Bitcoin is not backed by nothing." So we might have a conversation from there about what is Bitcoin backed by. Some people have concerns about Bitcoin's electrical usage. Bitcoin uses a small fraction of 1% of the world's electricity to do Bitcoin mining. And I would consider that electricity very well spent. And Bitcoin is always going to gravitate toward the cheapest electricity in the world, essentially the electricity that other people generally do not want, or that would overload the grid because that's the cheapest electricity. And so anyway, so we might have a conversation about that. But again, it's a tiny fraction of 1%. And you need it to power any network, whether it's artificial intelligence or the internet or anything like that. All of those run on electricity. We might have a conversation about what keeps the government from banning Bitcoin. The short take is it's not even possible. I mean, it's like literally mathematically and technologically impossible to ban Bitcoin. A government can certainly discourage its use, but banning its existence or its usage is technologically impossible. Same with the internet. People are just going to find a way to get to the internet one way or the other. And then also people tend to have issues on things like, let's see, what's the next? So electrical usage. They typically would have some questions about Bitcoin mining. I'm happy to explain how Bitcoin mining works, although the book Inventing Bitcoin by Jan Pritzker does a much better job of explaining how Bitcoin mining works than I ever could. So I'll leave it to that book. If you're curious how Bitcoin mining works, you can read that. I might do a video on it at some point. But anyway, so that's the typical conversation I would have. And with anybody who's, hard to convince about anything, it's not like you're going to convince everybody you talk to. So typically all you can do is you can move somebody from hoping that they don't have to figure out what Bitcoin is and that it will just magically go away so they don't have to mentally engage. You can move them from, hey, maybe from there to, hey, maybe there's something here. Maybe it's worth paying attention. Maybe when my friends talk about Bitcoin, I ought to pay attention instead of tuning out. And maybe there's, something to be learned in this process. So if somebody's willing to engage on that level, that there might be something here, money is valuable, that's typically all you can do in, a conversation or two with somebody. And then over time, they start getting interested and they start reading and they start thinking about what is money? Just that simple question. What is money? What gives money value? How can I trust my time and energy, which is stored in fiat currencies, and maybe there's a better alternative and all that. So anyway, so that's typically the conversation I have, but it would start with, is money valuable? And let's evaluate the different options and the pros and cons of each. And, let's at least understand, is it possible that there is a money that is better than fiat currencies and better than gold? And if somebody's willing to entertain the possibility that there could be a technological innovation that is better, then, you're well on your way to understanding the value of Bitcoin and the value it brings to the world. One other thing that a lot of people get hung up on is, okay, if Bitcoin was this radical new invention, what's going to keep some other radical new invention from taking its place? The best research report that answers that question is also the Bitcoin First Revisited report by Fidelity, and they go through why it's essentially highly unlikely, if not impossible, that any other cryptocurrency or any other type of currency would take the place of Bitcoin. And it has to do with the nature of the trade-offs you have to make and a bunch of other factors that I won't go into here. But short take is the likelihood that something else will one-up Bitcoin the way Bitcoin is one-upping gold is just extremely low probability. So anyway, if you are a Bitcoin skeptic and it just doesn't make sense to you and it's just not your thing, and I have not touched on what it is that is really the core issue for you, please leave it in the comments or message me at 601-207-0813. That number is 601-207-0813. Or message me on Facebook. Just make sure you're interacting with the real me, which is the one posting these videos, and not some fake account. And would love to answer your questions and help you in any way I possibly can to help you understand what is money, how do you store your time and energy over time, and in a way that the government cannot just debase and inflate away. So have a wonderful day. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks.